This poem's called The Party of Life. For my 25th birthday, the invitation said, "Wear black." An old primary school photo with my anxious face circled, including the big white bow in my hair, had an arrow and the words, "Will this girl make it to 25?" scrawled across the bottom. Perhaps it was those 60s cartoons that declared, "Never trust anyone over 25." Or maybe I just always knew I would burn myself out by then. Each new crack in my heart, each new cut of experience digging a grave in soft soil. So we called it an instead of a suicide party and told guests to wear black. In the kitchen, my housemates prepared a storyboard out of the pickings from a cardboard box of photos and souvenirs. Below a snap of my cubby house up on a trailer, taken on the day it was given away to a neighbour, Lynn wrote, "Never knew a permanent home," and stuck a pin in it. Ridiculously, we fought over this, the historian versus the journalists and fabulists. I was overruled, of course, howled down, wriggling. They evicted me from the party room. After all, I was dead, leaving them free to sift and interpret the traces with latitude and glee, never let the facts, etc. And here, I think about this, 25 years older and wiser, as I draw the curtains inside my high-top camper van, wash my plate and cup, climb into my narrow bed. On the evening of my 25th birthday, I was shooed out of the kitchen, away from the party food, and commanded to lie in state in my bedroom. So I put on my Miss Havisham wedding dress, complete with faint patches of mildew, and arranged myself on top of the covers. Jill's boyfriend came to keep me company, sitting quietly in his black turtleneck, my unofficial confessor. Each time I heard the girls calling, "Oh, she makes a lovely corpse," their voices drifting down the hallway, I stubbed out my cigarette, stashed my champagne under the bed, clasped my rose, closed my eyes, crossed my bare feet neatly. Mostly the guests were speechless. The flickering candles, the baby powder on my face, the band-aids just visible at the edges of my wrists. Did we go overboard? Even the trendy punks from down the street muttered, "This is macabre," and left. Only Teresa and Jenny, after pausing in the doorway for just a heartbeat, or two, maybe three, flung themselves at my feet, weeping, wailing, and gnashing their teeth, as they recounted our lives together. "Oh, remember when? Remember when?" I smiled a secret smile in the candlelit dark. Outside, in the bright living room, the guests bonded over the polystyrene tombstone, the epitaph from Plath, the black crepe paper chains, and the cardboard coffin containing the dips and chips. The volume grew steadily as they became even more exuberant, relieved just to be alive. Through the wall, voices rising, laughter, music, The Clash, Blondie, Human League, Marvin Gaye, every now and then the brittle sound of a glass being smashed. Never knew a permanent home. I honestly can't say why that one rankled so much. A fibro cubby house with its fake Fred Flintstone walls, as if that was my childhood home. That small, that flimsy. From the town of Bedrock, there are things right out of his story. But I guess it is true. I always have had an urge or a habit, not entirely conscient, a penchant to cast myself adrift, trusting to the invisible parachute. The schools I chose, the uni where I knew no one, moving state, jettisoning friendships. Always an eye out for the clean slate, the chance to reinvent, write the storyboard. At midnight, on my 25th birthday, I rose and joined the party in the living room. We sang Happy Birthday and Hip Hip Hooray, and I shed the lace wedding dress, emerging whole in a vintage white mini with a beaded neckline, and danced till dawn, virginal amid the inner city black. I rise, I rise. And now, here I am, at 50, rising, trailing wisps of stuff down the highway, the odd patch of mildew, in a cubby house again on wheels, still looking for the living room.
Wonderful, The Party of Life, read there by Beth Spencer, who is joining us on ArtSwank this morning from New South Wales. Good morning, Beth.
Good morning.
That's a lovely poem. I really enjoyed that poem. I remember reading that when I first talked to you about another book, Vagabondage, about your year in a van. So let's begin by talking about The Party of Life and how you were as a 25-year-old lying in a coffin while everyone partied around you. Tell us about that night.
I was actually lying on the bed, not the coffin. The chips and the dips were in the coffin.
Oh, that's right. Beg your pardon. You were in your wedding dress, a la Miss Havisham.
Yeah. One of the women that I lived with had this old wedding dress, and it was back in the days when you did that kind of thing, which I think you still do at Taradale, don't you? There's sort of this theatrical arty party where you play up, and rather than just get together and drink and dance, you have some sort of a theme and everything. So it just really grew out of, conversation, and then we ended up with this big thing, and nobody who actually came knew what was happening until they walked through the door. But it was surprisingly therapeutic for me.
Because?
It really did kind of exorcise that death wish that, for quite a while. And I think the imagination is an extraordinarily powerful thing. And playing it out like that kind of really altered things. It was actually quite annoying because it used to be my kind of go-to place when I felt really upset about something was to sort of fantasize suicide, and I couldn't do it again for quite a long time after that. So,
well, of course, you always think you're immortal when you're 25, so suicide is a very romantic idea. You don't really understand the kind of true horror of those kind of thoughts, I think, when you're that age.
I suppose so. Or maybe some of us just have a different relationship to death, or the thought of death.
Yeah. Yes.
A different attachment to life, which is really what Vagabondage was about in a way, that sort of kind of strange attachment to life that wasn't as anchored as a lot of people. I got to 50, so 25 years later, and I still didn't have a lot of those kind of things that anchor you into life. So it was quite a strange sort of a place to be when I hopped into that van.
Well, we should talk about that because you were living in central Victoria
I was living in the beautiful
that.
little town of Creswick.
Yep.
Yeah. And it was my very first home I ever owned, and I thought it was a miracle house. I mean, I think I got the last really cheap house in Creswick. I thought I'd never, as a starting writer, I'd never be able to buy a house, and it was like a sanctuary for me. It was also, it was interesting for me because I grew up in a small town. I grew up in a dairy town in Yarra Glen. And so my memories of small town was not really great. I felt it was claustrophobic and limiting and against, it was hard when you were different and so on. So it was amazing to move to Creswick, I think it was the year 2000, and find that I loved small town. If you get the right small town, I really loved it.
Yeah, it's all about the people, isn't it? If you've got like-minded souls, a small town can be the best place.
Well, they've changed
ever.
it. I mean, dairy towns are notoriously insular anyway because you never can leave home. You've got to be there to milk the cows twice a day. But not only that, it's like the small towns needed the artists and the writers and the alternative people to survive. They were sort of dying out until we all started moving into them. So the whole attitude had completely changed towards difference, really. So for anyone who's nervous about moving from the inner city to a small town, I reckon do it.
Don't be nervous, that's right. But then, of course, you sold your house and you swapped it for a van, a camper van that you went travelling around in for a long time. How long was it that you were away?
It was a year before I found another place. It's interesting because everyone sort of thinks, oh, lucky you, I'd love to go touring and travelling, and did you go to Central Australia and all that kind of thing. And I didn't really. It was more out of necessity because when the house took a long time to sell and the property prices boomed in Melbourne, so I couldn't afford anything else. And so it was kind of an in-transition, well, let's do this and see what happens kind of thing. And it was also, rather than escape, as most people do when they hop in a van, it was connecting So it was a chance for me to actually go and visit people that I hadn't seen for years. And so I pretty much just went up and down the coast, staying, sleeping out the front of inner city streets and things like that.
Yeah.
And it was much more of an interior journey than a...
And a lot of people thought that, they were jealous of you and your freedom, but you were often quite envious of what they had in their permanency.
I was. It was quite a dislocated time, and I'd actually given up writing. I'd sort of decided that, I couldn't do it anymore and stuff, and so I kind of really was very lost in a way. And it was interesting that sort of all these people that had all the things that sort of I kind of, would have... I felt that sort of make life really rich was sort of like envying me, and I felt like I had nothing. And the amazing thing was with publishing the book was the kind of people that respond to it. I mean, I thought it was a book about me being really odd and different and strange, and yet it's amazing that the people who do have all those things that I thought that I didn't have, who still have the same issues. We all have the same kind of... people write to me and say, "Oh, you're telling my story," and I think, "Wow, you've got 4 kids, a home, a husband, a job." You think I'm writing your story. So it was a kind of a coming home for me to sort of find my voice again as a writer and to have that response that it was like the very oddness of me made me able to write that book that connected with people.
But I've got a husband and I've got a house and all the rest of it, and I could see. It was like a runaway from home book. It felt like something that, Enid Blyton may have written, taking you off on the faraway tree. But this time you were older and there was no honey biscuits and you were going in a van and you were travelling up and down the coast and you were living a kind of 20s lifestyle in your 50s. I think that was what the appeal was for me anyway.
Yeah.
And also that poem that you read there, The Party of Life, that resonated with your Chinese translator. Now, you've got a Chinese translator. Let's talk about that. Who is this mystery Chinese translator, and why have they translated your book?
Okay, so Kit Kellen is an Australian poet, and he's written, I think he's just having his, must be about 15th book out in a month or two.
Uh-huh.
And he's also the professor of English at Macau University in China. And he's one of these extraordinary creative people. He's an artist, he's a writer, he's a teacher, a mentor, all these things, and he's a publisher as well. And so he, living in Macau, he saw this opportunity to connect up Australian poets with Chinese translators, often his graduate students. And he had a good instinct for who to put with who. And Ruby was a wonderful match for me, Ruby Chen, my translator, and also some of it's been translated by Iris Fan a bit earlier. And it was an amazing experience. It was such a fascinating experience because the book, it wasn't like I created a book and they translated it. The book was created out of the translation process.
Oh,
and
okay.
So, yeah,
it's notoriously difficult to translate poetry, isn't it? Because,
yeah.
it's all about the words and they don't necessarily translate with the same rhythm or the same... meter or even meaning for that matter. Yeah,
so you've got to get the meaning and you've got to make it a poem as well. And not only that, it's a different culture. And I had so many references. I mean, one of the poems referenced Bobby Brady, and that one, Lady Havisham, and all these, so many kind of things which I thought, how are they going to translate that? But she said that she found those kind of things just exotic, so even when she didn't know what they meant, it was exotic anyway, and it had a nice rhythm. But what was extraordinary for me was, so I just sent them a whole batch of poems, and she chose the ones that she liked best, and then we created the book around that. And it was amazing that things that I'd written in my late 20s, when I was a single woman without children, trying to work out what I'm going to do in my life, and she's the same age, single woman in China, pressure from parents to have children, get married. And she related to these same poems. It was extraordinary. Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it, how that connection, probably it's about youth, that the connection works, no matter what the culture.
Yeah.
But she wouldn't have been listening to Blondie and The Clash, though, I don't imagine.
I don't know what they... when at one of the launches, I had a Chinese... a Chinese woman read at each of the launches, read one of the poems, and we were talking afterwards about the, Bobby Brady. How did they translate Bobby Brady? And she didn't know what it was and had to look it up, and she said she loved it anyway.
Yeah.
So poetry is an amazing thing, the power of the words to connect. But that was really heartening for me because I'm a very slow writer. You know, I take a long time to write a book, and that stuff that I wrote 30 years ago is resonating to people now has been a really amazing experience. So I'm really grateful, and I love the littleness of the book. It's such cute. They're called pocket books. He's got about 15 in the series now, and I think it's flyingislands.org is where to go to.
Okay.
And they're just so beautifully produced. They're such a beautiful little object to hold in your hand, and then have these beautiful Chinese characters facing each page.
Yes, it's a wonderful thing. You've got another poem that I want to play called Waiting for Rain, which is... Tell us about this poem. We'll play it in a sec, but just set it up for us.
This poem was written when I was staying at my brother's vineyard in Colbinaban called the Shiraz Republic. And he bought must be about 15, 20 years ago, bought a derelict house basically on a derelict farm, and has over the years sort of transformed it into a vineyard with, you know, the house is really lovely now and all this kind of thing. And that he preserved this shed. That when he got there was a shed of the guy that lived there after his sister died. He actually just lived in the shed for about 20 years, and then the property was vacant for a long time. So I think he died in the 60s. And there's his false teeth and his boots and his briefcase with the wool, the shares, because his money was from wool and everything.
Yeah.
And Hessian blanket and all this kind of thing.
A proper swagman. He sounds like
in his little
swagman.
tiny sort of shed that he lived in. Yeah. And apparently he had like what in today's terms would be about $500,000 in the bank. Yeah. So it's sort of
okay, let's hear it. It's called Waiting for Rain by Beth Spencer.
Talk is cheap in this opportunity shop. Just a drought, the old men say, as I touch the frosted rims of 1950s tumblers, run the spines of a row of condensed books, breathe in bridesmaid dresses and lace curtains. Next, Lake Cooper, bone dry, a long list of birds on the board, waiting to return. A ghost wind shifts in the reeds, like the mice rustling in the Hessian walls of my brother's kitchen, and Spike with his Christmas brone in April. I step gingerly through a shower of rose petals that bloody the path to the shed, where all that remains is a set of false teeth on a fruit box, and lost in an untouched bank account, a fist full of wool money. Outside in the yellow grass, the sun rests down on a rusting harvester. Just a drought, and the earth turns from us to us as we dream.
And that's an experience that I think that drought anyway is an experience that a lot of people around here can relate to. And I love the detail of the teeth on the fruit box.
Yeah, it's worth a visit. He's got a website, shirazrepublic.com.au.
Okay, and he sells a good Shiraz, I take it, because it's up near
He
Heathcote.
does, and not only that, he has this really interesting thing called Rent-A-Row. Sorry for doing an advertisement for him, but it's called Rent-A-Row, and you can actually rent a row of grapes and come up and pick them, and he'll help you to turn them into wine and bottle them.
Really? That's a great idea.
Yeah.
So you get your own little...
your own label. You can
your own label and your own
label.
vintage and your own harvest. Wow. And does he have people stomping the grapes in the big barrels?
Don't think they stomp.
They don't do it anymore?
I think it's sort of a little bit more technical than that these days. But it's great. So, like, he used to live in Coburg, and he noticed that a lot of the older people, if they moved to nursing homes and stuff, they could no longer make their wine.
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea.
He thought he had this dream of bussing up people to bottle their own wine.
Lovely. My father was a bit of a wine buff, and I actually resisted because I didn't. I don't know. I was a brat, but he used to drag us off to vineyards, and I remember there was one that we were at, and we had to stand over these massive barrels of grapes, and they were all kind of floating around on the top, and push them down. That was the thing you had to do, like push them underneath and not stomp them, but use a sort of wooden paddle. And there was this friend of his, and he was up there, and suddenly he just lost his balance and just fell backwards into this massive vat of grapes, and I can still see him, you know, sitting. He looked like the happiest man in the world, because he was literally up to his neck in wine, with his little hat perched on the top of his head.
I reckon you should write a poem about that, Suzanne.
I might well do that, Beth.
Good.
Look, thank you so much for coming in today and sharing that wonderful writing of yours with us. The Party of Life is the book by Beth Spencer. Now tell us where we can get a copy of it.
Well, that one, Vagabondage is easy to get, because that's University of Western Australia Press, so you can get it from their website, you can get it from my website, you can order it in bookshops.
Okay.
The Party of Life is it's kind of like a little rare book, because there's not that many copies and they're not in bookshops. It's only $10, which is a bargain for a book.
Yeah.
And so you can get it direct from me, or if I'm at a reading or something like that, you can buy it from me. And
so
the same
if
with
I
everybody
put your
else that's
Facebook page up on the ArtSwank Facebook page,
Yep.
or link through to you, then people can contact you via us at ArtSwank. Might be the easiest way to do it.
Or they just go to bethspencer.com and use the contact form. And if anybody knows somebody who reads Mandarin and would like a copy, I can send them a PDF for free. I'm happy to do that.
Okay. So all you Mandarin readers out there who'd like to read Beth's poetry in Mandarin, get in contact.
Yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you,
and
Beth.
You did a beautiful job. People have said it's a beautiful translation who
can read it. Did you send it to Kevin Rudd? Because I know he can read Mandarin. No?
Oh, yes, I hadn't thought of that. Good idea.
Okay, well, that's about all we've got time for today on ArtSwank. I'm Suzanne Donisthorpe, and Frank Velds and I will see you next week. Don't forget, there is our Facebook page that we really like you to check out, because if you haven't heard this show live, you can hear it at any time